You can see where Hanna was located at 10 a.m., just off the Texas coast, tracking toward the west at 7 miles per hour. Max sustained winds now actually at 80 miles per hour. So it is forecast to make landfall as a hurricane, probably a Category 1 hurricane, although some strengthening could still occur over the next several hours before it makes landfall later this afternoon. Although the center of the storm is tracking well to our south, we are seeing impacts, of course, up here in southeast Texas. I do want you to notice one change. The tropical storm warning that included areas up to High Island, including Galveston Bay, that is actually dropped off now. So our tropical storm warning is south of San Luis Pass, and then the hurricane warning is shown in the red area there. But certainly, Hanna has strengthened overnight, now a fairly formidable hurricane. Here's a look at the latest satellite image. You can see a hint of an eye there, perhaps a covering of some high clouds over that eye, and getting very close now to the South Texas coast and the coastal bend areas. The radar image here, you can clearly see the eye and the location of the hurricane, now getting very close to land, as I said, making landfall this afternoon or early evening. And but I also want you to look to the north of the center, and you see those bands of thunderstorms streaming in off the Gulf over southeast Texas. Those are the bands we had been talking about as the weeks gone on that would give us our rain and our impacts. And so it is still the case that if we were to get a band set up over one area, we could be looking at some flood issues. So far, these cells have been moving, and we haven't seen that yet, but it certainly could occur. And we'll talk more about the heavy rain threat later on. Also on this plot, notice some of the observations there. You can see some buoys offshore showing 20-foot seas, 17-foot on the other side of the eye wall. And so significant wave heights, especially down toward the center, but also up into our southern coastal waters. So this is certainly a big marine impact as well. Some of the winds also, these G values are wind gusts, 56 knots, and seeing quite a bit of 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts close to the center. Closer to home, our winds are more on the order of 20 to 30 miles per hour for the most part, but we have seen some gusts up to 40 miles per hour. All kinds of watches and warnings up for the area. We've got a flash flood watch in green. If you look at the map in the upper left here, it gives you some idea of what we've got going. The flash flood watch also includes these counties along the coast that are under the tropical storm warning. And so flash flood watch area is where we're most concerned about that flash flood potential, and the tropical storm warning is where we see the heavy wind threat. As I said, the areas north of San Luis, land areas, and Galveston Bay have just been dropped from this tropical storm warning. So that's an update since this map was created. And then we do have the storm surge warning south of Sargent, Texas, along the areas shaded in purple. That's where the greatest threat of storm surge flooding is. But of course, we've had minor flooding also farther north up across Galveston Island and along Galveston Bay, and there is a coastal flood warning out for those areas. Just looking at the event overall, we really have all hazards to some degree. We've got a wind hazard, especially as you get down into that tropical storm warning area, down toward Matagorda Bay and south of San Luis Pass. Storm surge, mostly minor, but some moderate surge flooding occurring. And again, the greatest risk there is down the coast, down toward Matagorda Bay, closer to the storm track. Heavy rainfall will be an issue if we get the banding that we're talking about, and bands setting up over one area. So we're still going to have to monitor the radar and look for that, that perhaps lining up most likely in the flash flood watch area. River flood warning, not a huge concern. Most of the rain is falling near the coastal areas and heavier amounts down the coast. So it is something we'll have to watch, but not expected to be a major event for our area. Certainly will be in the mid and South Texas zones. Tornadoes, there is a threat there as well in these bands, and that threat, we'll talk about that more in a moment, but that will be mainly today. And then marine is certainly a big issue. High seas, high winds, close to the center, but also up into our waters as well. And there's a lot of text here. I'm not going to read through this, of course, but you'll have this in the slides. This sort of quantifies these impacts I'm talking about, from wind to storm surge, flooding, rain, tornado, and marine. Trying to put some numbers down for y'all, and you can look those over when we send the slides out. But as I said, all impacts to some degree. Probably the greatest would be flooding rains if we get the banding, and the storm surge inundation, but certainly some wind and impacts as well, and marine very significant also. It's pretty clear now that the tropical storm force winds are going to be mostly south of San Luis Pass. Now, that's not to say we couldn't get a wind gust in a squall or a thunderstorm that might get up into tropical storm force areas even further north. But from the system itself, the focus is mostly on the south and mid-Texas coast areas, the coastal bend, and you see those higher probabilities down there. And then looking at the higher wind threats there, this is for sustained 58-mile-per-hour winds. And again, the focus is going to be closer to the center track for those absolute higher winds. These are strong tropical storm force winds. And of course, some of those areas are in a hurricane warning, and we'd expect some hurricane force winds in those higher zones as well. Talking about the storm surge aspect now, the map on the left-hand side is kind of a good overview of the storm surge impacts along the Texas coast. So you can see absolute max values, and these are water depth above ground in the low-lying areas. And so you see 3 to 5 feet down the coast there along the coastal bend. That's bracketed by an area of 2 to 4 feet that extends up to Sargent, Texas, and then 1 to 2 feet north of Sargent to High Island and along Galveston Bay. So even though the center of the storm is tracking well south, as we know, folks around here know this, we get surge impacts up into our area as well as surf. And so we're certainly seeing that there. I do want to show the the water level prediction for Galveston just as an example in the lower right, and you can see we're heading toward a high tide actually occurring about now. This data is a little bit old actually, so that high tide, that peak you see here this morning is around 4 feet above mean low water. Many of y'all use that kind of level as a reference, but really the point here is to show that it's that next high tide cycles that we would worry about the flooding for the most part, and then but as we get into tonight and tomorrow, we should expect to see lower tide levels. Here we're looking at storm total rainfall, just kind of in a broad sense. You see very high amounts, perhaps 10 to 15 inches down the coast in South Texas. Up our way, more like 2 to 4 inches. And again, this will come with these off and on showers and thunderstorms. We could see locally 8 inches, again, if we do get banding over one area. So we do need to watch out for that. Now, the showers and storms should sort of diminish somewhat tonight. But they will fire again tomorrow, the way it looks now. So even though the system will be pretty much out of the way now, we'll have moisture feeding off the Gulf, and we'll have to look out for some heavy downpours tomorrow as well as today. And the Weather Prediction Center has issued kind of a general area of flash flood risk. You can see there, as far as Southeast Texas is concerned, it's mostly the coastal counties there in the slight risk area. And again, I'd refer you to our flash flood watch as well to try to highlight the areas we're most concerned. But again, it's all going to be about where any bands set up. So we're just going to have to monitor the radar and keep an eye on that the next few days. The risk is sort of broken down by periods. On the right-hand column of this graphic, you can see today through Sunday morning, but also Sunday through Monday morning, we're still in the slight risk for excessive rainfall or flash flooding. So the flash flood risk is not over after today. We've got to get through tomorrow as well. And then lastly, tornado potential, mainly along the coast. You see the slight risk area, including Brazoria, Matagorda, and Jackson County. But there is a marginal risk extending a bit further north, even into up to I-10, including Houston and Columbus, and then down to Galveston. So the severe threat would be for brief tornadoes with these bands, that we can get with these tropical systems. So that's what we're looking at there. So just to sum up, we are looking at Hanna making landfall today as a hurricane along the South Texas coast. Although the center is tracking well south, we're getting these bands on the northern side, bringing showers and thunderstorms and a variety of hazards, everything from some gusty winds to some coastal flooding and even a tornado threat. The flash flood threat is sort of conditional. If we do get bands training, we could see up to 8 inches in those areas, and then we would be concerned about flash flooding. And a big marine hazard as well. We saw those seas closer to the center, up above 20 feet, and some of those high seas extend up north toward Matagorda as well. And so confidence is higher, of course, as we get to landfall and the event is unfolding. But we still need to monitor the radar, especially for the positioning of any of those bands. All right, so that's kind of a quick overview of where we're at. What I would like to do now is take your questions. You can either type them in or ask them, and for you to ask them, I need to unmute the attendees here, so bear with me a moment.